How you doing?
Great, Director Williams.
Director Williams,
Oh, yeah, you see, they moved it.
Oh, really?
you're away from the air conditioner.
Finally.
But you think you might be able to hear acoustics in this room, Mark. We will call to order the meeting of the Metro Water District Representative Caucus and special meeting of the Board of Directors of the West Basin Municipal Water District. Mr. General Manager, could you determine if we have a quorum?
Happy to do so. Director Scott Houston, Director Don Deere,
Here.
Director Gloria Gray,
Here.
Director Harold Williams,
Here.
President Desi Alvarez.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, great. Do you have any public comments?
President Alvarez, we do not have any requests for public comment, though this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If there are any members of the public that would like to make public comment, now would be the time to do so. Please indicate so by raising your virtual hand, and we will call on you.
Seeing none,
I see no requests.
we will move to discussion items. And the first item is the Metropolitan awarded grant funding for conservation programs. So, Mr. General Manager, would you like to introduce that?
Yes, thank you very much, President Alvarez. For this presentation, we do have Krista Guerrero, the resource specialist for Metropolitan Water District. She'll be joining us virtually.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to be here today and discuss this with you. So today I will be going over briefly the grants that Metropolitan has received from both the federal and state funding opportunities that we've recently been awarded. So first, with the federal funding from the USBR Water Smart program, for FY22, we did receive $2 million as part of a turf replacement project for our public agency properties. So that is specifically going towards public properties only. And that increased our incentive from $3 to $4. That amount has been available to applicants, public agency applicants of our turf replacement program since November of 2022. And that funding is still available, so has not been fully prescribed, and so that public agencies can continue to receive $4 at this time. The USBR Water Smart FY23 application was to increase the turf replacement for residential and CII from $2 to $3, and we were awarded $5 million through that process. That award came through in May of 2023. We have very, very recently just finished our agreement, and that extra dollar will launch March 4th of 2024. The two state applications that we received, or grant funding we received, the urban drought relief funding from 2021 was broken into two pieces. We received $2 million for turf replacement for residential and CII properties, which at that time increased our incentive from $2 to $3. That funding has been fully subscribed, and so there is none left available as part of that. But another portion of that grant was for residential direct install through our program with SoCal Gas. So these are retrofits to homes for things like high efficiency clothes washers, toilets. We even have started to add controller upgrades to that as well. And so we received $2.5 million for that program, and that has been in place since November of 2022 as well. Our most recent grant was $38 million that we received from DWR, broken into 3 different categories. One, the largest chunk of it, $30 million, going to turf replacement specifically for CII. And the reason that we're doing it that way is this was specifically to assist with the removal of non-functional turf, and the direction that we're given under AB 1572 and Metropolitan's commitment to reduce non-functional turf in our service area. So that $30 million will be going to increase the incentive from $2 to $3 a square foot back again as it was before. We also have $5 million for the same SoCal Gas direct install program to retrofit additional homes and expand that program. More clothes washers going in, more toilets and efficient devices in disadvantaged and underserved communities and low-income customers. And then finally, we received $3 million for firefighter training recirculation units, what are commonly called pump pods, which assist firefighters with the ability to train and do everything that they need to stay on top of their work without, while still saving water at the same time. So we received $3 million for that, where we'll be purchasing units and distributing them throughout the member agency service area. We received a notice of award from DWR in June of 2023. We are still in process on that agreement, so we do not have a specific implementation date, but we are hopeful that it should be soon, and we're aiming for spring of 2024. It won't be March 4th, but hopefully not too much longer after that time. And that's my summary of our grant applications and awards, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from any of the board members? How about anybody in the audience? Well, I have a question for you, Krista. On these grants, are there any matching funds associated with them? And if so, which ones have matching funds and what are the matching fund amounts?
Yes, thank you for asking that. So there is a required matching fund for these grants. It's usually a 50% cost share, specifically for the USBR grants, which we are able to do through Metropolitan's conservation funds. And so we matched 50%, exactly same cost.
And the DWR grants?
The DWR grants varied in their cost share requirements. But we were able to, because you were more competitive if you did cost share, we did offer up a 50% cost share for the DWR grants as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
All right, if there's no further questions, we'll move on to our next item, which is the federal legislative update. Mr. General Manager.
Yes, thank you very much, President Alvarez. And I always get excited about these federal and state legislative updates. Because Metropolitan Water District staff does an amazing job representing our interests, both in Washington, D.C. as well as Sacramento. For the federal legislative update, we do have Abby Schneider, the executive legislative representative for Metropolitan Water District, joining us virtually. Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you, and I hope you can hear me. Just want to check before I start launching.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I appreciate the opportunity and thank you for that warm welcome. This month, there is no LRAC committee meeting. Instead, I provided the board with a written report on activities from Washington, D.C. My oral report today tracks my written report, and listening to me will hopefully save you a few pages of reading. Next slide, please. I'm going to begin with an appropriations update. The federal fiscal year 2023 ended on September 30th, and the federal government has been funded by a series of short duration continuing resolutions, or CRs, since that. CRs maintain federal government spending at the previous fiscal year's level for a set period of time. They are extremely common, as Congress hasn't passed an appropriations bill on time since 1996. Currently, the federal government is funded by what is referred to as a laddered CR. Funding for some federal agencies, including the Bureau of Reclamation and Army Corps of Engineers, will expire on March 1st. And funding for the other federal agencies, including EPA and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, will expire on March 8th. This staggered deadline for federal agency funding is a unique FY24 spin on prior year's CRs. But other than that, this is a pretty typical DC game. Pleased to report that after a month of negotiation, on January 27th, lawmakers reached a top-line deal for what total spending will be in each of the 12 FY24 appropriations bills. This deal is what I call a baby step forward in the appropriations process. Each of the 12 appropriation bills fund multiple federal agencies, and lawmakers have not reached a deal on agency-specific numbers. Statements from members of the Appropriations Committee indicate federal agencies have been spared from the steep cuts in the House-drafted FY24 bills, but agency funding will likely be lower in FY24 than FY23. The hope is to reach a deal on actual bill language before March 1st. If not, the federal government will need to be funded by yet another CR. Next slide, please. Congress provided $1.1 billion through the American Rescue Plan Act and Consolidated Appropriation Act of 2021 to help low-income households pay their water and wastewater bills, prevent shutoffs, and restore services. This temporary assistance program, known as LIWAP, or the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program, was established at the height of the COVID-19 emergency and expired at the end of FY23. Senator Padilla plans to introduce a bill this month to make the program permanent, and Metropolitan provided a support letter to his office. Companion House legislation is also in the works and will hopefully be introduced this month. Next slide, please. As part of its legislative and environmental planning processes, Metropolitan regularly monitors federal legislative efforts that propose to overlay national monuments, parks, or other federal uses on Metropolitan's rights-of-way or infrastructure that could potentially impact operations. Supporters of a campaign to designate a new Chuckwalla National Monument in Riverside and Imperial counties contacted Metropolitan staff to discuss the creation of this monument. If created, the monument would span 660,000 acres and be the largest protected area of the Colorado Desert bioregion. A group of Metropolitan staff, including employees in the Office of the General Counsel, Land Management, and Geodetics, analyzed the proposed impacts to Metropolitan's operation. Staff worked with supporters to exclude the Colorado River Aqueduct and other Metropolitan facilities from the proposed monument's boundaries. Staff also worked to ensure the proposed presidential proclamation includes provisions to allow the continued operation of water facilities and other utilities in the national monument. Supporters of the monument designation agreed to the language and boundary changes requested by Metropolitan. As a result of this agreement, and consistent with our 24 legislative policies and principles, Metropolitan supports the designation of the Chuckwalla National Monument. Next slide, please. The House Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Environment, Manufacturing, and Critical Minerals held a hearing entitled Ensuring the Cybersecurity of America's Drinking Water Systems on January 31st. Representatives from the Association of Metropolitan Water Agencies, American Water Works Association, National Rural Water Association, and Association of Safe Drinking Water Administrators all testified at the hearing. The hearing focused on potential opportunities to enhance the cybersecurity of water systems. EPA is the primary federal agency responsible for drinking water security in coordination with the Department of Homeland Security. Beginning in 2002, Congress mandated that community water systems conduct vulnerability assessments and prepare emergency response plans for their facilities to prepare for terrorist attacks and other intentional acts. Congress amended this mandate in 2018 to include risk and resilience assessments for these facilities. The House Subcommittee is exploring if EPA needs additional direction or funding resources to improve the existing program or create a new one. No legislation was considered at the hearing, but may be introduced in the future, and I will keep you all updated. Next slide, please. This concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have now, or if you want me to wait till after Jay provides his report, whatever works for all of you. Thank you.
Well, Abby, thank you very much for your report, and we will take you up on both options. We'll see if anybody has questions now, and we'll let them also ask questions that may come up after Jay's report. So, any board members, any questions?
No, thank you.
Any questions from any of our audience members?
President,
General Manager, you have your hand up.
I did have a question. And Abby, I don't know if you know the specific details, but in the low-income household water assistance program, it seems to me that am I correct in saying that there's two pathways to assistance? One would be the household and one would be the utility. Is that correct?
Not to my knowledge, I could be incorrect, but it isn't this low-income household water assistance program is, it might depend by county, but this is really designed for each household to apply, much like LIHEAP and other HHS programs.
And I guess that's my question, because I do have concerns about putting the onus on the individual low-income household, because a lot of times it's very difficult for them to go through the process as far as accessing a program that, if you go through the, I think it's the Department of Community Services and Development, CSD, here in California, it's pretty extensive, the process of applying. And I guess my question is, when the programs were discussed originally, I thought it was going to provide a utility option where the individual utilities could apply based off of arrearages or past due amounts and provide their ratepayers some assistance, more directly. Is that not the case, or is there an opportunity?
So Jay can correct me if I'm
how to do
wrong,
that?
but my general understanding is in California, there is also an arrearages program that was funded using a different federal dollars, also in ARPA. And that is the one that I know Metropolitan has sent alerts out, but the LIWAP program is just households. And it's interesting to hear you say you would prefer utilities, because the general feedback that was provided by the national associations when the program was created was actually the opposite of that utilities didn't want to be responsible for income verification. And that they preferred the community, the whatever the California one is, the CDS model, as opposed to the utility.
That part I completely understand them not wanting to do that. I guess the question is how we can do a better job of letting people know that these programs are available and see how we can assist them. Maybe we can work within West Basin to look and see how we outreach.
Yeah, and I know there's funding, some of the funding that is provided to the states for the program included an outreach budget. And that would be carried forward to help with that. And I think they're in the process of compiling a lessons learned document to help going forward.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Actually, that raises a question. In West Basin, did that program get used by our residents? And if so, do you know how extensively it was used?
We'll definitely have to look and see how much it's being used. And that's kind of my question is, if you look at, and I won't make a direct comparison, but if you look at kind of the college debt programs where they would do repayment, most people didn't apply because they don't recognize that they're available. They don't know what the ins and outs of the program are. So the program was ultimately, very much underutilized. And here you have a program, and if you go to the CSD website, it's pretty lengthy and extensive. So I would need to do some research to see how many members of our communities are utilizing that. And then also the need from our individual retailers. Perhaps we can work with them. But I think it's worthwhile providing the outreach so that community members understand what's available to them, because it can probably be pretty overwhelming to be behind on your utility payments, and then also have to identify the right program for you and how to get some assistance.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no further questions, then we'll move on to the state legislative update.
Yes, thank you very much, President Alvarez. As you mentioned, this is the state legislative update, and we're lucky to have Jay Jefferson II, the executive legislative representative for Metropolitan Water District, join us. This is his second time joining the West Basin Caucus meeting. And Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, you're coming up on a year, right? Your anniversary.
I sure am. You've got a good memory.
Well, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Great, thank you. Appreciate the welcome. Good afternoon to everyone, and thanks for allowing me to join this meeting. And so I'd like to take the time to provide you all with the legislative update, and I'll go ahead and start with our legislative calendar. And so could you go to the next slide and then again, please? Great. And so with the legislature now back in session as of January 3rd, members of the legislature are focused on finalizing their bill packages for the year ahead. February 16th is the deadline to introduce new bills, and committees will begin to meet and hear bills in March. Metropolitan staff are currently tracking a number of bills that have been introduced. There's a big ramp up for bill introductions during this period, and we'll be able to provide an update on measures of interest once we complete our analysis. In addition, towards the end of March, the legislature will go on a spring recess from March 21st to March 29th. And so now transitioning to look at some of the leadership changes that we're seeing in 2024. Next slide, please. And so at the end of last year's session, we welcomed a new Speaker of the Assembly and Speaker Robert Rivas from the city of Salinas. And on February 5th, just a couple of days ago, we welcomed a new Pro Tem of the Senate and Pro Tem Mike McGuire from the city of San Rafael. Next slide, please. And so with the new Assembly Speaker came a number of other changes in committee leadership that included the appointment of Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel, who's now chair of Budget Committee, Assemblymember Buffy Wicks, who now chairs the Appropriations Committee, and Assemblymember Diane Pappin, who currently chairs Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife Committee. Next slide, please. And then other notable appointments include Assemblymember Isaac Bryan, who's the chair of Natural Resources Committee, and Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia, who's the chair of the Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee. In addition, Assemblymember Steve Bennett, there on the far right, who served as chair under the prior speaker, is retaining his position as chair of the Budget Subcommittee that handles water and environmental issues. Next slide, please. Great. And so Governor Newsom released his budget proposal in January 10th, and this proposal proposes to close a $38 billion deficit. On the other hand, the Legislative Analyst's Office reports that this is a closure of a $58 billion deficit. The difference in this $20 billion figure is largely explained through a reduction in the baseline of Prop 98 K through 14 funding, which declined by $15 billion as a result of reduced state revenues. Due to this significant decrease in education spending, it's expected that education, particularly K through 14, is going to be an important budget priority for the legislature as we approach the May revise. Overall, in terms of budget highlights and areas that are relevant to Metropolitan and our members, there were $13.1 billion in reserves used to close the deficit, and in total, $8.5 billion in cuts across all programs, with about $3 billion in those cuts coming specifically to water and climate programs. Over $250 million was either reverted or delayed for recycled water grant funding. And so the State Water Board released guidance that they're going to be reducing the grant caps for their recycled water grants from 15 million to 5 million. And then in addition, over $100 million was cut in PFAS support programs. And in addition, funding for the Oroville Dam was further delayed. This was an item that we were monitoring from last year. They delayed the $200 million for the Oroville Dam in last year's budget, and they delayed it further again in this budget. But one piece of good news is that the budget does retain the governor's $400 million commitment to support the agreements to support healthy rivers and landscapes, or the VAs as they're been commonly known. Next slide, please. And so given the state's fiscal outlook, many think it's more important than ever to put a climate bond before voters as an additional source of revenue for critical water projects and environmental issues. As noted in prior reports, the two climate bonds of interest are waiting in policy committees in the legislature, along with a number of other bond proposals dealing with education, housing, and the fentanyl crisis. While there is uncertainty around which of these bond proposals we're going to make it to the November ballot, we intend to continue to work with the water community to elevate the importance of the climate moving forward this year. The governor has prioritized his mental health bond for the March ballot, and the outcomes of that vote will shape the discussions around what should move forward for November. It is expected that if there is a path to advance a climate bond this year, it will come down to negotiations between May and June, where the governor will have released his May revised budget proposal by May 15th, and the legislature will have until June 27th to officially qualify a bond for the November ballot. Next slide, please. So following a controversial year for water rights policy, only SB 389 by Senator Allen was signed into law. Two other bills, AB 460 by Bauer Kahan and AB 1337 by Wicks, are two-year bills that are still active. AB 460 seeks to expand the State Water Board's interim relief authority, and AB 1337 seeks to expand the board's authority to issue curtailment orders. It is our understanding that the advocates or the sponsors for these bills have an interest in moving these measures forward this year, but we have not heard that message from the authors directly. But based on our board adopted water rights policy principles, Metropolitan has taken an opposed position on these two measures following our work last year, where we were not able to secure amendments to address our concerns. Next slide, please. And now for a few new legislative proposals, one from Metropolitan and the two others from our association partners. So following board approval, Metropolitan staff are pursuing an extension of Metropolitan's legislative exemption under the Surface Mining and Reclamation Act as part of MET operations along the Colorado River Aqueduct. This authority was originally provided to Metropolitan in 2021 and will sunset January 1, 2026. On to our association partner legislative proposals. The first one sponsored by Aqua. This one deals with Prop 218, exhaustion of administrative remedies and extra record evidence. And so in summary, following a recent lawsuit where water rate increases have been challenged in court, Aqua is moving this proposal to basically give water agencies an additional tool to help better communicate with the public and reduce the risk of litigation following a rate increase. This proposal would apply to properly related or sewer fees or charges and also special assessments. And so the first piece of it is the exhaustion of administrative remedies. This portion ensures that someone who wants to present a legal challenge to a water agency's rate increase, that the agency will have an opportunity to address those parties directly before a case is taken to court. This proposal spells out a process that includes public agencies noting the rate increase with a 45-day comment period and requires the agency to respond in writing to all written comments presented within that comment period. If a party files a complaint to the agency then has the opportunity to respond and possibly adjust their rate proposal if issues are identified. However, if the agency fails to address the complaint, the party would then have grounds to file a lawsuit. The second component is the record review rule. And this provision basically ensures that insofar as a court is considering a legal challenge, that the scope of evidence is limited to evidence that was either developed by or submitted to the water agency as part of its process for establishing the rate increase. The provisions of this bill are permissive, so it's not a requirement, but obviously would be a tool that agencies could benefit from. Metropolitan will look to take a position once this measure is introduced. The second measure, sponsored by CMUA, this bill is going to require the Governor's Office of Planning and Research to develop a permitting transparency dashboard that shows the status of each state permit for projects with a cost of over $100 million. This online dashboard is intended to make state environmental permitting more transparent and help the public better understand the timing of approving large projects. And similar to the prior proposal, Metropolitan will look to take a position once this is officially introduced. Next slide, please. And so this concludes my presentation. Thank you all again, and happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Jay. Any questions from any of our members?
No, thank you.
And from the audience, any questions? All right, no questions? Okay, then that brings us to the end of our items, and next up is director's comment. So Director Deere, do you have any comments or future agenda items you'd like to have brought before us?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Director Houston,
I have no comments, but I guess that's one of the fastest caucus lunches I've ever seen. So anyway, Happy New Year and no comments. Thanks.
right. Director Williams,
My comment is simply this: I am so happy to see all of the rain. I don't care what anyone says, that it's too much, too little, we weren't ready for it. It's great. I'd love to see more of it, and I'm looking forward to the next storm.
you have to wait 2 weeks.
I can wait.
Director Gray, do you have any comments or agenda
I
items
just
you'd
want
like
to
to
thank
put back?
I just wanted to thank everyone for the reports this morning. Thank you. And we're still gonna get rain coming.
I think we're all very grateful for the rain, even though we did lose a lot of it. If we don't have the facilities to capture the majority of it. And with that, I don't have any additional comments. We are adjourned.
Thank you very much.